Let me ask you a question. Do you know what all of these tournament wins have in common? Skeet Reese winning at Smith Mountain, Brandon Polinick winning at Bull Shoals, Lee Livesey winning at Chickamauga, and Jason Christie winning at the Sabine River. All of these anglers won by fishing the extremes when it comes to bass fishing. And whether you are a tournament angler or not, fishing the extremes can help you to catch bass when nobody else can catch them. And if you don't know what I mean, well, stay tuned. It's gonna be a good one. This video is brought to you by the Deep Dive app. This app really helps you to locate and start catching bass a lot quicker. Once you get to the lake that you are fishing, you can actually select that lake on the app. It's going to bring in all the current weather conditions. You can also select the water temperature, the water clarity, whether you're fishing around vegetation or not, and if you are fishing in a protected area. Once you put in this information, the app will spit out some strategies that you can use to start catching bass a lot quicker. If this is something that interests you, I'm gonna leave a link down below in the description. You can click on that link and greatly help support the Bass Fishing HQ channel. This video is going to be a little bit different than some of the other videos you may have seen on my channel, but I think if you understand the concept at what I am talking about, it may actually help you to catch more fish than other videos on this channel. Now, we will talk about lures and techniques, but what I really want to talk to you about is more bass fishing theory. Because I fish a lot of tournaments, I'm always paying attention to how guys are winning those tournaments. If you fish tournaments, this could really help you. If you don't, it can still help you to catch a lot of bass when no one else can catch bass. And something that I've kind of seen a pattern of when it comes to tournament fishing is guys that fish the extremes when it comes to fishing tend to win tournaments. And what I mean by the extremes is that in bass fishing, there is a spectrum for basically everything that we do, all the decisions that we make that help us to catch fish. One example of this that I think will help you to understand what I am talking about is actually when it comes to choosing the size of our lures. Several years ago, there was a Bassmaster Elite Series tournament on Smith Mountain Lake in Virginia. And Skeet Reese won this tournament by fishing a big, soft swim bait in areas where other guys were kind of fishing your normal lures. Not only did he win this tournament, but he absolutely dominated the event. And he was fishing the extremes. He was fishing the extremes when it comes to the size of your lure. If you think about the size of the lures that we fish most of the time, they kind of live in this medium zone that's right in the middle of the spectrum. This is lures like a 1/2 ounce chatterbait or a 3/8 ounce spinnerbait or a 1/2 ounce jig or a beaver. These are the specific size of lures that most guys fish when they are out there on the water. Now, when you think about the extremes, when it comes to lure size, you have lures that are really small, like Ned rigs, and you have lures that are really big, like swim baits. And there are a lot of situations when you're out there fishing that if you go with something that is a lot smaller or you go with something that is a lot bigger, you're going to catch a lot more fish because everybody else is going down the bank or fishing off the bank with that same size lure, the same one that we all throw. And so therefore, if you're fishing something that's bigger, you're doing something that's different. Or you're fishing something that's smaller and you might just get a lot more bites and catch a lot more fish. Now let's talk about another bass fishing extreme when it comes to the lures that you go with, and that is the weight of the lures. One of the most critical things in bass fishing is the rate of fall, the rate at which that bait falls in the water. I think that is way more important than the color of your lure most of the time. Now, like I talked about there being a spectrum when it comes to the size of your lure, there's also a spectrum when it comes to the weight of your lure. And it seems like a lot of times when guys are fishing a jig or a Texas rig, which is the two techniques where rate of fall is extremely important, most guys live in a zone that is kind of in the middle of this spectrum. I would say that most of the time guys are fishing these lures, they live in that 3/8 ounce size to 1/2 ounce size. That is the zone where it seems like almost everybody lives. When you hear any professional talk about a certain lure weight that they are using, it's 3/8 ounce, it's 1/2 ounce, it's 3/8 ounce, it's 1/2 ounce. But you have to remember the extremes when it comes to weight. And that either means something that is a lot smaller than 3/8, maybe that's an 1/8 ounce, or that's a 1/4 ounce, or something that is a lot heavier than a 1/2. Maybe this is a 1 ounce weight. Now, again, like lure size, there are days when you go out there fishing where selecting something that falls a lot slower or something that falls a lot faster is going to get you way more bites than that guy who is fishing that same 3/8 or half-ounce size bait. Years ago, I was fishing a big local tournament. This was a part of the Ohio Mega Bass Trail, and we were fishing on a lake that gets a ton of pressure on it. And that particular day, unfortunately, I couldn't find a partner for this tournament. The 3 or 4 guys that I always go to just could not fish, and so I ended up fishing this tournament all by myself. Now in this tournament, a lot of guys were doing the exact same thing. They were flipping jigs and soft plastics to the bank because a lot of fish were up on the bank shallow, and we had had a cold front the night before, and so I decided in this tournament that I was gonna pick up a 1/4 ounce jig as opposed to the one that I typically throw that is in that 3/8 to half-ounce size. And although fishing that 1/4 ounce jig was a little bit difficult, I got way more bites than a lot of guys that were fishing in close proximity to me. Now in this tournament, I was able to catch a good bag, and I finished in 3rd place in this team event by fishing by myself. And the big thing here is I was fishing a lighter weight than most other guys were fishing. Now 1 year later, I was fishing the same tournament on the same body of water, and I remembered that from the year prior, but I had a partner this time, and we were actually able to get 1st place and win like 3,000 bucks in a local tournament. Now there is a spectrum when it comes to the lures that you select, but there's also a spectrum when it comes to the depth at which you are fishing. Now the big thing when it comes to the depth spectrum is that there is a zone on your body of water where most guys are going to spend their time fishing. Now this zone is not going to be the same for each lake. For instance, I fished on Lake Champlain up in New York, where you typically fish a lot deeper. You know, that zone up there is probably 15 to 25 foot of water. But I've also fished in Florida where this zone is probably about 3 to 8 foot of water. But no matter where you are fishing, when it comes to depth, there is a zone where a lot of guys are fishing, and sometimes going to the extremes of that spectrum, whether that's extremely shallow or extremely deep, can help you to catch fish again when nobody else is catching fish. If you remember a tournament years ago that Brandon Polinick won on Bull Shoals Lake, the fish for the most part in this tournament were fairly shallow. A lot of guys were fishing in kind of that 3 to 8 foot zone, but the one guy that wasn't was Brandon Polinick. He was fishing in about 16 to 20 foot of water, and he was fishing a deep diving crankbait a lot deeper than everybody else was fishing. And in this tournament, he dominated. 3 out of 4 days in this tournament, he caught the biggest bag each and every single day. Because why? He was fishing on the extremes. He was fishing deeper when everybody was fishing a certain zone. We also just saw this a few years ago with Lee Livesey when they were fishing on Lake Chickamauga. Now during this tournament, a lot of guys were frogging in kind of this same depth zone. But what did Lee Livesey do? He went extremely shallow. He went to the other side of the spectrum, and he was fishing a frog in literally like 6 inches to a foot of water, a place where a lot of anglers just didn't even think to throw a frog. And again, he dominated the event by fishing the extremes when it comes to bass fishing. I really think that this is so important when it comes to bass fishing, and I hope that I am getting through to you guys what exactly I'm talking about. And I'm gonna give you one more example of fishing the extremes, and that actually comes down to the distance that you are willing to travel. You know, when you pull up to any given boat ramp these days, there's a lot of other bass boat trailers that are close by, and whether you are fishing a tournament or you are just fishing for fun, there is a certain distance that most guys are willing to travel to catch bass, right? There is, again, a spectrum. There is a zone at which guys are going to travel. Now, if you look at the way that Jason Christie won an Elite Series event on the Sabine River years ago, he was fishing at the extremes. He was actually pushing his bass boat in his gas tank the furthest that it could go. And he was actually fishing a very small creek in this event, and he really had no other competition in there because guys were not willing to travel as far as he did. And he had this creek all by himself. He caught a lot of bass and ended up winning that tournament. Now, again, on the other side of the spectrum, there was a Bassmaster Open event just a few years ago on the Arkansas River. And there was a lot of guys actually traveling a great distance to go out there and catch bass. But believe it or not, a lot of the guys that did well in that event literally were staying put. They hardly even left the boat ramp. I think one guy was quoted saying that he used less than 5 gallons of gas all week, literally just fishing right by the boat ramp. Again, on the other side of the spectrum. Now, if you guys enjoyed kind of this more bass fishing theory video, please let me know down below in the comments, because I would love to do more of this stuff. And if you enjoyed this video, you'll probably like this video that I did right here, where it talks about how you can use triangles to catch bass. And it's very similar to the bass fishing theory that we talked about in this video. Click on that one, watch it next, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video.